What happens when a charming stranger hires you to play his girlfriend for Thanksgiving? In the heart of Asheville's twinkling holiday lights, Jessica Hale agrees to a wild deal with Brandon, a man hiding more than his heart. Their fake romance sparkles under the Blue Ridge Mountains, but family dinners, nosy rivals, and a shocking secret threaten to unravel everything. Will Jessica discover the truth behind Brandon's polished smile? Can their staged love survive the chaos of turkey, drama, and unexpected feelings? From festive walks to high-stakes confrontations, this 8-part series dives into a whirlwind of laughs, lies, and maybe something real. Join us for a holiday tale where nothing is what it seems. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share your thoughts below. What would you do for a fake love deal? In the heart of Asheville, North Carolina, where the Blue Ridge Mountains cast their timeless shadows and the streets hum with the eclectic buzz of artists and entrepreneurs, Brandon Tate sat at a corner table in the bustling Bean and Brush Cafe. The autumn air carried the crisp promise of Thanksgiving, just a week away, and the cafe was alive with the scent of roasted coffee and the chatter of locals planning their holiday feasts. Brandon, a 32-year-old CEO of Verdant Labs, a green tech startup revolutionizing sustainable energy, was anything but festive. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from his grandmother, Evelyn Tate, a formidable woman whose investment in Verdant Labs was as critical as her insistence that Brandon settle down. "Bring a girlfriend to Thanksgiving, or I'm pulling my funding." Her latest text read, blunt as ever. Brandon sighed, running a hand through his dark hair, his sharp blue eyes scanning the cafe for his unlikely solution. Jessica Hale. Jessica, a 29-year-old freelance graphic designer, was Asheville's hidden gem, her portfolio brimming with vibrant designs that captured the city's artistic soul. Yet she struggled to break into the competitive design scene, her inbox filled with rejections from firms like Verdant Labs. When a cryptic message from a matchmaker offered her $10,000 to pose as someone's girlfriend for the holiday, Jessica saw a lifeline. She negotiated down to $1,000 after a heated exchange, figuring it was enough to cover her rent and buy some time to pitch her work. Now, she stood outside the Bean and Brush, her auburn hair tucked under a knitted beanie, clutching a sketchbook. As her nerves danced, she wore a forest green coat, the one detail she'd shared with the mysterious Brandon Ford. Inside, Brandon's gaze landed on a woman in a green coat by the counter, her blonde hair a stark contrast to the description he'd been given. Misreading the situation, he approached his polished charm in full force. "Jessica, I'm Brana, ready to play the part." The woman turned, her eyes wide with confusion, and laughed. "Sorry, buddy, I'm Claire, and I'm married." Mortified, Brandon retreated, only to bump into the real Jessica, who'd been watching from a nearby table, her hazel eyes glinting with amusement. "Smooth move, CEO," she quipped, her voice carrying the sardonic edge of someone who'd navigated too many disappointments. Brandon flushed, his usual confidence shaken, but he recovered with a grin. "Let's just say I'm better at running a company than spotting green coats." They settled at a table, the air between them crackling with cautious curiosity. Jessica laid out her terms: $1,000 for 4 days, photos and videos to convince his grandmother, and no funny business. Brandon, hiding his true identity as Verdant Labs CEO, agreed to pose as Brandon Ford, a mid-level project manager. He needed Jessica to sell the illusion to Evelyn, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. "My grandma thinks I'm wasting my life on work," he explained, his tone softer than he intended. "She wants me married by 35, or she cut me off." Jessica raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "And I need to pay my rent, so let's make this convincing. What's my backstory?" They crafted a tale. Jessica, a rising designer, met Brandon at a local art festival, and their whirlwind romance was the talk of Asheville. She'd stay at his family's mountain estate, play the doting girlfriend, and report back to Evelyn. With curated snapshots, they hashed out details. Jessica's wit disarmed Brandon. She teased his choice of a Tesla Model X for the trip, assuming it was rented to impress. "Fancy car for a project manager," she said, smirking. Brandon shrugged, concealing that the car was his own. "Borrowed it from a friend," he lied, his stomach twisting at the deception. Jessica, meanwhile, worried about her own family. Her parents, Diane and Tom Hale, had been hounding her to find a nice guy since she moved back to Asheville from a failed stint in Chicago. "If I show up alone again, my mom will sign me up for every dating app in the county," Jessica admitted, her laugh tinged with exasperation. Brandon sensed a kindred spirit, someone else dodging familial expectations, but he kept his guard up. Their planning was interrupted by a barista calling Jessica's name for her order, a pumpkin spice latte that matched the season. Brandon seized the moment to test their chemistry, snapping a candid photo of her laughing, her freckles catching the light. "First photo for Grandma," he said, showing her the shot. Jessica nodded approvingly, but her eyes lingered on his, searching for something unspoken. The cafe's folk music faded into the background as they exchanged numbers, their fingers brushing briefly. "We've got this," Jessica said, her confidence masking a flicker of doubt. Brandon felt a nagging sense that this ruse might be harder than either anticipated. Outside, Asheville's streets glowed with early holiday lights, the Biltmore village bustling with shoppers. Brandon offered to drive Jessica home, but she declined, insisting on walking. "I need to practice my in-love face," she joked, tossing her scarf over her shoulder. As she vanished into the crowd, Brandon leaned against his Tesla, his mind racing. He wasn't just hiding his CEO status, he was hiding a deal with a major investor that could make or break Verdun Slabs. If Evelyn pulled her funding, the company might collapse. Jessica, unaware of the stakes, was his only shot at keeping the illusion alive. But her sharp wit and unguarded moments were already stirring something in him, something he couldn't afford to feel. Back at her loft, Jessica stared at her sketchbook. Her latest design, a mural inspired by Asheville's autumn foliage. She opened her phone to Brandon's contact, his photo showing a disarming smile that didn't match the project manager persona. She texted him, "Send me the backstory again. I'm not memorizing your lies for free." His reply came instantly, "Fair, adding a coffee stipend to your fee." Jessica laughed, but her thoughts drifted to the holiday ahead. Facing her parents, her nosy cousin Leela, and the expectations of a small town wasn't new, but doing it with a stranger felt like stepping onto a tightrope. She didn't know Brandon was balancing on one too, his empire teetering on their performance. As Thanksgiving loomed, both grappled with the weight of their lies. Brandon's office at Verdun Labs buzzed with last-minute preparations for the investor pitch, but his mind was on Jessica's laugh, her defiance, her unguarded moments. Jessica, meanwhile, sketched late into the night, wondering if this fake romance would cost her more than she'd bargained for. The bean and brush encounter had set the stage, but the real test awaited in the mountains, where family, secrets, and unexpected feelings would collide. The late November sun dipped below the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting a golden glow over Asheville's eclectic downtown. Brandon Tate gripped the steering wheel of his Tesla Model X, the sleek black vehicle humming softly as he navigated the winding streets toward Jessica Hale's loft. His phone buzzed with a new message from his assistant at Verdun Labs, reminding him of a looming investor meeting that could secure millions for their solar panel project. But his focus was elsewhere, on the deal he'd struck with Jessica, the sharp-witted designer who'd agreed to pose as his girlfriend for Thanksgiving. The memory of their awkward meeting at the Bean and Brush Cafe lingered, her hazel eyes and quick sarcasm leaving an impression he couldn't shake. He'd told her he was Brandon Ford, a project manager, hiding his CEO status to keep the ruse simple. Now, as he pulled up to her building, he wondered if simplicity was even possible with someone like Jessica. Inside her loft, Jessica stood before a mirror, adjusting a burgundy sweater that complemented the autumn tones of ash. Her sketchbook lay open on the coffee table, half-finished designs of mountain-inspired murals scattered across the pages. She'd spent the morning memorizing the fake backstory she and Brandon had crafted. They'd met at the River Arts District Festival, bonded over local craft beer, and fallen into a whirlwind romance. It was believable enough, but Jessica's stomach churned at the thought of facing her parents, Diane and Tom Hale. They'd been relentless about her single status since she'd returned to Asheville after a failed design job in Chicago. "You're almost 30, Jess," her mom had said last week, her voice dripping with concern. "It's time to settle down." Jessica had rolled her eyes, but the pressure was real. Brandon's $1,000 offer was her ticket to dodging another holiday lecture. A knock at the door snapped her out of her thoughts. Brandon stood in the hallway, his tailored jacket and easy smile betraying the polished confidence of someone used to getting his way. "Ready to become Asheville's favorite couple?" he asked, holding up a leather-bound notebook labeled Operation Fake Love. Jessica snorted, grabbing her coat. "You're way too prepared for this." "What's in there? A script?" Brandon grinned, flipping it open to reveal bullet points. "Smile often, hold hands occasionally, don't mention tech jargon." "It's a game plan," he said. "We need to sell this to my grandma and your parents." Jessica scanned the list, her lips twitching. "You forgot, don't trip over your lies." "Let's add that." They laughed, the tension easing. But Jessica caught a flicker of something in Brandon's eyes, nervousness, maybe, or something deeper, in the Tesla. They finalized their rules. No real intimacy, staged photos for Evelyn, and a cover story that avoided too many details. "My parents will grill you," Jessica warned, buckling her seatbelt. "Mom's all about feelings, but Dad's a retired mechanic. He'll ask about your job, your car, your intentions." Brandon nodded, his fingers drumming on the wheel. "I've got this. I'm a project manager, decent salary, boring life. Nothing to suspect." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "That Tesla's not exactly boring. You sure it's borrowed?" Brandon's smile tightened, but he deflected. "Friend's car. Makes us look good, right?" Jessica let it slide, but a seed of doubt took root. He was too smooth, too practiced, like he was hiding more than just a fake relationship. The drive to the Hale family home took them through Asheville's outskirts, where colorful murals adorned old warehouses and the air smelled of pine. Jessica pointed out landmarks: a craft brewery, a quirky bookstore sharing bits of her life to ease the awkwardness. Brandon listened, genuinely curious, asking about her designs. "You're really into this art scene," he said, glancing at her sketchbook in the back seat. "Why freelance? You could be running your own studio." Jessica shrugged, her guard up. "Big dreams, small bank account. Verdendob's rejected my portfolio twice, so I'm stuck pitching to smaller firms." Brandon's jaw tightened, but he covered it with a nod. He knew her portfolio, his team had dismissed it for lacking corporate polish, a decision he now regretted. They pulled up to a cozy craftsman-style house, its porch adorned with pumpkins and a Happy Thanksgiving banner. Diane Hale, a warm woman with Jessica's freckles, rushed out, enveloping her daughter in a hug. "Jess, you didn't tell us he was so handsome," she gushed, eyeing Brandon. Tom Hale followed, his weathered hands stuffed in his pockets, his gaze skeptical. "Nice car," he said, circling the Tesla. "Must cost a fortune to rent." Brandon flashed a disarming smile. "Borrowed it from a buddy." "I'm just a project manager, sir. Nothing fancy." Tom grunted, unconvinced, but led them inside, where the scent of roasting turkey filled the air. The living room was a shrine to family memories, photos of Jessica as a kid, her art projects framed alongside her brother's soccer trophies. Diane bombarded Brandon with questions: how they met, what he liked about Jessica. He stuck to the script, describing their festival meet-cute, with just enough charm to make Diane beam. Jessica chimed in, her hand brushing Brandon's for effect, sending an unexpected jolt through him. Tom, however, wasn't sold. "Project manager? Huh, what do you manage? Websites? Apps?" Brandon hesitated, then leaned into a vague answer about team coordination. Jessica jumped in, deflecting with a story about their first date at a local theory, her improvisation so seamless Brandon almost believed it himself. As Diane set the table, neighbors dropped by, drawn by the Tesla parked out front. "Is that your boyfriend's?" one asked, eyeing Jessica with a mix of envy and curiosity. Jessica nodded, playing the part, but the attention made her uneasy. She wasn't used to being the center of gossip in her tight-knit neighborhood. Brandon sensed her discomfort and steered the conversation to Asheville's art scene, praising Jessica's designs. "She's got a mural plan that'll blow your mind," he said, his enthusiasm catching her off guard. For a moment, their eyes met, and Jessica felt a warmth she hadn't expected. Was he acting, or did he mean it? Dinner was a spread of Southern classics: turkey, cornbread, stuffing, sweet potato casserole, but the atmosphere grew tense when Diane brought up Jessica's single status. "You're not getting any younger, Jess," she said, passing the gravy. "Brandon seems like a keeper." Jessica forced a smile, her fingers tightening around her fork. Brandon, sensing her unease, reached for her hand under the table, a gesture meant to sell the ruse, but feeling oddly genuine. Tom's eyes narrowed. "So, Brandon, you planning to stick around Asheville, or is this a short-term thing?" The question hung heavy, and Jessica's heart raced. They'd rehearsed this, but the scrutiny felt personal. Brandon leaned forward, his voice steady. "I'm here as long as Jessica wants me," he said, his gaze locking with hers. The room fell silent, Diane's smile widening, but Tom's skepticism deepened. "We'll see," he muttered, carving another slice of turkey. As the evening wore on, Jessica and Brandon exchanged staged glances, their hands brushing for the camera as Diane snapped photos for her family album. But each touch, each shared laugh, blurred the line between pretense and reality. Jessica caught herself wondering about the man beside her, his easy charm, his quick deflections. Who was Brandon Ford? Really? As they cleared the table, Brandon overheard Tom muttering to Diane about the Tesla. "No project manager drives a car like that," he said. Jessica, wiping dishes, shot Brandon a look. "You're gonna have to work harder to fool my dad," she whispered. Brandon nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Tomorrow, they'd face his grandmother at the Tate estate, where the stakes were higher. Evelyn's sharp eyes would see through any crack in their story, and Verdendob's future hung in the balance. As he helped Jessica with the dishes, their shoulders brushing in the cramped kitchen, Brandon felt a pull he couldn't ignore. This was supposed to be a deal, a performance, so why did it feel like something more? The Hale family home in Asheville glowed under the soft flicker of string lights draped across the porch, their warm amber hue reflecting the spirit of Thanksgiving. Inside, the dining room was a tableau of Southern tradition. A long oak table, groaned under the weight of a golden brown turkey, cornbread stuffing, green bean casserole, and a towering sweet potato pie, its cinnamon scent mingling with the crisp November air slipping through an open window. Jessica Hale, her auburn hair pulled into a loose braid, adjusted a napkin with nervous precision, her hazel eyes darting to Brandon Tate, who sat beside her, his tailored blazer slightly out of place among the cozy chaos. Their fake relationship, sealed just days ago at the Bean and Brush Cafe, was about to face its first real test. The Hale family's Thanksgiving dinner, where every glance and word would be scrutinized. Brandon, posing as Brandon Ford, a project manager at kept his posture relaxed, but his mind raced. His grandmother, Evelyn's ultimatum, bring a girlfriend or lose her investment, loomed over him, and the investor pitch for Verdendob's solar panel project was just days away. Jessica, meanwhile, was dodging her own pressures. Her parents, Diane and Tom Hale, had spent years nudging her toward marriage, and this dinner was their chance to size up her new boyfriend. The couple had rehearsed their story, a meet-cute, at the River Arts District Festival, a shared love for Asheville's craft beer, and a romance that bloomed under the city's autumn leaves. But as Diane bustled in with a tray of cranberry sauce, her smile radiant, Jessica felt the weight of the lie settle in her chest. The dining room filled with family and neighbors, their chatter a lively backdrop to the clink of silverware. Diane, her freckles mirroring Jessica's, beamed at Brandon. "It's so nice to finally meet someone who makes Jess light up," she said, passing him a bowl of mashed potatoes. Brandon flashed a practiced smile, his blue eyes crinkling. "She's the one who lights up a room, Mrs. Hale. I'm just lucky to keep up." Jessica nudged his foot under the table, a silent warning not to oversell it, but her lips twitched with amusement. Tom, seated at the head of the table, wasn't as easily charmed. His weathered hands carved the turkey with precision, his gaze fixed on Brandon. "So, project manager," he said, his tone probing. "What exactly do you manage at this Verdun Labs place?" "Solar panels, wind turbines." Brandon leaned back, his voice steady. "A bit of everything, sir. I coordinate teams, keep projects on track. It's less glamorous than it sounds." Tom grunted, unconvinced, his mechanics instincts sensing something off. Before he could press further, the front door swung open, announcing the arrival of Jessica's cousin Leila Vaughn and her fiancé Jasper Holt. Leila, a petite woman with a sharp bob and sharper tongue, swept in with a bottle of local wine, her eyes scanning Brandon like a hawk spotting prey. Jasper, a lanky 30-year-old with ambitions bigger than his junior role at Verdun Labs, followed, his handshake with Brandon overly firm. "Heard you work at the company," Jasper said, his smile tight. "Funny, I don't recall a Brandon Ford in my department." Jessica's stomach nodded. She hadn't anticipated Jasper's connection to Verdun Labs, and Brandon's quick glance told her he hadn't either. "I'm in a different division," Brandon said smoothly, his years of boardroom deflections kicking in. "We're a big team, probably never crossed paths." Jasper's eyes narrowed, but Lila cut in, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Jess, you've been holding out on us. A boyfriend? And he's got a Tesla. Spill the details." Jessica forced a laugh, her hand brushing Brandon's for effect, the contact sending an unexpected spark through her. "It's new," she said, sticking to the script. "We met at the art festival, bonded over some IPAs. Right, babe?" Brandon nodded, his arm draping casually over her chair, a move that felt too natural. As the meal progressed, the table buzzed with stories of past Thanksgivings and neighborhood gossip. Diane shared a tale of Jessica's childhood, painting her as a dreamer who'd once covered the garage in chalk murals. Brandon listened, genuinely captivated, picturing a young Jessica with paint on her cheeks. He chimed in with a fabricated story about their first date at a cidery, describing how Jessica had teased him for ordering a too-sweet apple cider. The table laughed, but Leila's eyes glinted with suspicion. "Sounds romantic," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. "But, Brandon, how does a project manager afford a Tesla? You moonlighting as a crypto bro or something?" The room chuckled, but Tom's gaze sharpened, and Jessica's heart raced. She squeezed Brandon's knee under the table, urging him to deflect. Brandon leaned forward, his charm unshaken. "Borrowed it from a friend," he said, his lie as smooth as the gravy Diane passed around. "Just trying to impress Jess." The answer earned a nod from Diane, but Tom wasn't buying it. "Borrowed, huh? Must be some friend." Jasper seized the moment, leaning in with a smirk. "Verdun Labs doesn't pay project managers enough for friends with Teslas. What's your actual deal, Ford?" Jessica jumped in, her voice firm. "Can we not interrogate my boyfriend over pie? He's here, isn't he?" Her defense was sharp, but her hand lingered on Brandon's, a gesture that felt less staged than she expected. The tension eased as Diane steered the conversation to holiday plans. But Leila wasn't done. She leaned toward Jessica, her voice low. "You've never mentioned this guy before, Jess. Seems convenient. Right before Thanksgiving." Jessica forced a smile, her mind racing for a comeback. Brandon, sensing her struggle, reached for her hand openly this time, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "We wanted to keep it quiet," he said, his voice warm. "But I couldn't miss a chance to meet the family that made Jess who she is." Diane practically glowed, but Lila's eyes narrowed, and Jasper's smirk didn't fade. Jessica felt a mix of gratitude and unease. Brandon was too good at this, his lies blending seamlessly with sincerity. As the evening wore on, neighbors drifted in, drawn by the festive spread and the mystery of Jessica's new man. One, a chatty retiree, named Mrs. Carter, gushed over the Tesla parked outside. "Is that yours, Brandon? You must be doing well." Jessica cringed, but Brandon handled it with ease, spinning a tale about his friend's car while snapping a photo of Jessica with a slice of pie for Evelyn's album. The photo captured her mid-laugh, her eyes bright, and Brandon paused, struck by how real it looked. Jessica caught him staring and raised an eyebrow. "Don't get any ideas, Ford," she whispered. but her teasing held a warmth that surprised them both. After dinner, as guests mingled, Tom pulled Brandon aside in the garage, where an old Chevy truck sat half-repaired. "You seem like a decent guy," Tom said, his voice gruff, "but I know when someone's hiding something. That car, your slick answers you're not just a project manager, are you?" Brandon's pulse quickened, but he held Tom's gaze. "I'm just a guy who cares about your daughter, sir," he said, the half-truth slipping out too easily. Tom studied him, then nodded slowly. "Prove it then. Stick around." Back in the dining room, Jessica overheard Lila whispering to Jasper about checking up on Brandon. Her stomach sank. This was supposed to be a simple ruse, but the lines were blurring between lies and truth, between acting and feeling. As they cleared the table, Brandon and Jessica worked side by side, their banter light but charged. "You're not bad at this boyfriend thing," she said, handing him a plate. "Almost had me fooled." Brandon grinned, but his eyes held hers a moment too long. "Almost," he teased, his voice low. Outside, the Asheville night sparkled with early holiday lights, but inside, the stakes were rising. Tomorrow, they'd face Evelyn at the Tate estate, where Brandon's own secrets would be harder to keep. And as Jessica's hand brushed his, lingering just a second longer than necessary, both wondered if this fake romance was already slipping out of their control. The morning after Thanksgiving, Asheville woke to a crisp dawn, the Blue Ridge Mountains draped in a thin mist that clung to the city's vibrant streets. The Greenwood Inn, a boutique hotel owned by Verdun Labs, stood proudly in the heart of downtown, its modern facade of glass and reclaimed wood, a testament to the company's commitment to sustainable luxury. Inside, the private dining room buzzed with anticipation as the Hale family gathered for a post-Thanksgiving brunch, a tradition Diane Hale insisted on to keep the holiday spirit alive. Jessica Hale adjusted her scarf, her hazel eyes scanning the room for Brandon Tate, who stood by a window overlooking the bustling Biltmore Avenue. Their fake relationship, now 2 days deep, had survived the scrutiny of last night's dinner. But Jessica sensed the real test was coming. Brandon, still posing as Brandon Ford, a project manager, flashed her a reassuring smile. But his grip on his coffee mug betrayed a flicker of unease. The brunch spread was a feast of southern indulgence, fluffy biscuits with honey butter, shrimp and grits, and a towering stack of pumpkin pancakes dusted with powdered sugar. Diane, ever the gracious host, fluttered between guests, her laughter mingling with the clink of mimosa glasses. Tom Hale, however, kept his distance, his mechanic's hands folded tightly as he watched Brandon with the same skepticism he'd shown at dinner. Jessica leaned toward Brandon, her voice low. "Dad's still not buying your story," she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. "And Leela's been texting Jasper all morning." "They're up to something," Brandon nodded, his blue eyes narrowing as he spotted Leela Vaughn and Jasper Holt entering the room, their heads bent together in hushed conversation. Leela, her sharp bob catching the morning light, made a beeline for Jessica, her smile more predatory than warm. "Jess, this place is gorgeous," she said, gesturing to the inn's sleek decor-recycled wood tables, solar-powered chandeliers, and framed prints of Asheville's skyline. "Your boyfriend must have some pull to book this room." Jasper, trailing behind, smirked, his lanky frame dwarfing the table as he sat. "Yeah, Ford," he said, his tone dripping with challenge. "How's a project manager swinging a private brunch at a Verdun Labs property? You got friends in high places." Jessica's stomach tightened. Jasper's junior role at Verdun Labs gave him just enough insider knowledge to be dangerous, and his ambition made him relentless. She glanced at Brandon, praying he'd stick to their script. Brandon leaned back, his charm as polished as the inn's marble floors. "Just called in a favor," he said, his voice casual. "Verdun Labs likes to keep employees happy, right?" Jasper's smirk faltered, but his eyes gleamed with suspicion. "Funny," he said, slicing into a pancake. "I checked the employee directory. No Brandon Ford in project management. Care to explain?" The table fell silent, Diane's smile freezing, Tom's gaze sharpening. Jessica jumped in, her voice sharp. "Jasper, can you not turn brunch into a deposition? He's here with me, not applying for your job?" Lila laughed, but it was a brittle sound, and Jasper's jaw tightened, his ego bruised. Diane, sensing the tension, steered the conversation to safer ground, asking about Jessica's latest mural project. Jessica seized the opportunity, describing her vision for a piece inspired by Asheville's autumn foliage, her passion lighting up her face. Brandon watched, captivated, his mind drifting from the investor pitch looming over Verdun Labs. Seen her portfolio rejected by his team for lacking market appeal, and now regretted not pushing for a second look. "It's going to be stunning," he said, his sincerity catching Jessica off guard. She met his gaze, a flush creeping up her cheeks. But the moment was shattered when Jasper leaned forward, his voice low and pointed. "Let's cut the art talk. Brandon, how about you show us that employee card of yours? Prove you're legit." The challenge hung in the air, a gauntlet thrown in front of the entire family. Jessica's heart raced. She hadn't anticipated Jasper's persistence, and Brandon's cover was papered in, but Brandon didn't flinch. He reached into his wallet, producing a sleek black card with the Verdant Labs logo, its embedded chip glinting under the chandelier. "Happy to oblige," he said, handing it to the waiter, who'd just approached to clear plates. "Put the brunch on this. Employee discount should cover it." The waiter swiped the card, his eyes widening slightly before he nodded. "Full discount applied, sir. No charge." The table erupted in murmurs, Diane clapping her hands in delight, but Jasper's face darkened, his suspicions only deepening. Jessica shot Brandon a look, half impressed, half worried. "Nice save," she whispered, but her mind churned. A full discount. Even senior employees didn't get that kind of perk. Who was this guy? Before she could press him, Lila leaned in, her voice saccharine. "Wow, Jess, you really hit the jackpot with this one. But I'm curious how'd you two get so serious so fast?" Jessica forced a laugh, her hand brushing Brandon's for effect, the contact sending a jolt through her. "Just clicked," she said, sticking to their story. "Right, babe?" Brandon nodded, his arm sliding around her chair, his touch lingering. "Couldn't resist her," he said, his voice warm. And Jessica wondered if he was still acting. As the brunch wound down, Brandon excused himself to take a call, stepping onto the inn's balcony overlooking Asheville's skyline. The call wasn't about the investor pitch, it was to Verdant Labs' compliance department. Jasper's name had come up in a recent audit. He'd been funneling company resources to a side project, a breach serious enough for termination. Brandon, his voice low, instructed his team to act swiftly, ensuring the dismissal would hit before Jasper could dig deeper into Brandon Ford. It was a calculated move, one that protected his cover and Verdant Labs' integrity, but it left a bitter taste. He wasn't just playing a role with Jessica, he was manipulating pieces behind the scenes, and the weight of it gnawed at him. Back inside, Jessica mingled with neighbors who'd joined the brunch, their questions about Brandon relentless. "He's got that CEO vibe," one said, eyeing his tailored blazer. Jessica laughed it off, but her unease grew. She caught Brandon returning, his expression unreadable, and pulled him aside. "What was that call about?" she asked, her tone sharp. "And how'd you pull off a full discount?" "That's not normal." Brandon shrugged, his smile disarming. "Just some work stuff in the card. Perks of being a good employee." Jessica didn't buy it, but Diane's call for a group photo interrupted them. They posed, Brandon's arm around Jessica, their smiles practiced, but their closeness real. The camera flash captured a moment that felt less like a lie. As the family dispersed, Jasper cornered Brandon near the coat rack, his voice low. "I'm watching you, Ford. Something's off, and I'll figure it out." Brandon met his gaze, unflinching. "Good luck with that," he said, his tone cool. Jessica, overhearing, felt a chill. Jasper's ambition was a threat, but Brandon's confidence was unnerving. As they left the inn, the Asheville streets glittering with holiday lights, Jessica grabbed Brandon's arm. "You better not be hiding anything big," she said, half joking. Brandon's smile faltered, but he covered it with a wink. "Just trying to keep up with you, Jess." Inside, he knew the truth was a ticking bomb, and tomorrow's visit to the Tate estate would only raise the stakes. For Jessica, each shared glance, each brush of his hand, made the line between pretense and reality blur further, leaving her wondering what she'd gotten herself into. The streets of Asheville shimmered under a canopy of twinkling Christmas lights, their glow reflecting off the cobblestones of Biltmore Village as dusk settled over the city. The crisp November air carried the scent of roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor, mingling with the faint hum of holiday carols drifting from a street performer's guitar. Jessica Hale pulled her forest green coat tighter, her boots clicking against the pavement as she walked beside Brandon Tate, whose hands were stuffed in the pockets of his tailored jacket. The Thanksgiving brunch at the Greenwood Inn had left them both on edge, with Jasper Holt's pointed accusations and the weight of their fake relationship pressing harder than ever. Yet, as they wandered away from the Hale family's scrutiny, the night felt like a reprieve. A chance to breathe, or so Jessica hoped. Their plan had been simple: stage a romantic evening stroll for the photos Brandon needed to convince his grandmother, Evelyn, that their romance was real. Jessica held her phone, snapping candids of Brandon against the backdrop of Asheville's festive storefronts, his dark hair catching the light as he flashed a disarming smile. "You're a natural at this," she said, reviewing a shot of him, leaning against a lamppost, his blue eyes bright with mischief. "Almost too good. You sure you're not an actor?" Brandon chuckled, his breath visible in the chilly air. "Just trying to keep up with you, Jess. You're the one selling this whole perfect couple vibe." His tone was teasing, but his gaze lingered, and Jessica felt a flutter she quickly dismissed. This was a job, nothing more. They paused at the Biltmore Estate's entrance, where a massive Christmas tree stood, adorned with ornaments the size of softballs, its lights casting a warm glow over the crowds. Brandon suggested a detour to the estate's gardens, where a fire pit event promised hot cider and a quieter setting. "Evelyn loves cozy vibes," he said, handing Jessica a steaming mug from a vendor. "A photo here will seal the deal." Jessica nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. The brunch had shaken her Jasper's suspicions, her father's probing stare, and Brandon's mysterious full discount at the inn. She sipped her cider, the warmth soothing her nerves, and glanced at him. "You handled Jasper like a pro back There, she said, her tone probing. But that card trick, not exactly project manager perks. Brandon's smile tightened, his fingers tracing the rim of his mug. Just good at networking, he said, deflecting with the ease of someone used to dodging tough questions. Jessica wasn't buying it, but before she could press, he gestured to a nearby fire pit, where families and couples gathered, their laughter mingling with the crackle of burning logs. Come on, he said, his voice softer. Let's get that photo and maybe actually enjoy ourselves for 5 minutes. Jessica hesitated, then followed, her guards slipping as the fire's warmth enveloped them. They sat on a wooden bench, the flames casting shadows across Brandon's face. And for a moment, the pretense faded. The conversation turned personal, unscripted. Jessica, prompted by the cider and the fire's glow, opened up about her struggles. As a designer, Asheville's art scene is brutal, she said, her voice tinged with frustration. I pour my heart into these murals, but firms like Verdun Labs keep rejecting me. They want polished, not me. Her honesty caught Brandon off guard, his mind flashing to her portfolio, which he'd seen dismissed by his team. Guilt gnawed at him. He could have overridden that decision but hadn't. Your work's incredible, he said, his sincerity surprising them both. It's not about polish, it's about soul. Verdant Labs is missing out. Jessica's eyes met his, searching for the catch, but found none. Thanks, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Most people don't get it. Brandon, still, as Brandon Ford, felt the urge to confess his real role but bit it back. Instead, he shared a half-truth. I know pressure too, he said, staring into the fire. My family expects me to have it all figured out. Career, love, the works. Sometimes I'm just trying to keep the plates spinning. Jessica nodded, her guards softening. Sounds like we're both dodging expectations, she said, her smile wry. Who knew faking a relationship would feel so real? Their laughter broke the tension, and Brandon reached for her hand, a staged gesture for a passing photographer, but his touch lingered, his thumb brushing her knuckles. Jessica didn't pull away, her heart racing as the line between act and truth blurred. Their moment was interrupted by a notification on Jessica's phone. A message from a local design collective about a pitch opportunity with Verdun. Excited, she opened her portfolio app, only to find her latest designs corrupted, replaced with pixelated messes. No, she muttered, her face palling. This can't be happening. Brandon leaned in, concerned. What's wrong? Jessica showed him the screen, her voice shaking. Someone sabotaged my work. This was my shot. She suspected Talia Reed, a rival designer who'd been openly dismissive of her at a recent gallery event. Talia's sleek, corporate style had won her favor with big firms, and her jealousy of Jessica's raw talent was no secret. Brandon's jaw tightened, his CEO instincts kicking in. He knew Talia's work she'd pitched to Verdun Labs before. Her designs competent but soulless. We'll fix this, he said, his tone firm. Send me the originals. I know someone who can help. Jessica raised an eyebrow, skeptical. You a project manager? What? You've got a tech wizard on speed dial? Brandon grinned, covering his slip. Something like that. Trust me. Jessica hesitated, then nodded, emailing him the files. She didn't know Brandon was already planning to pull strings at Verdun Labs, ensuring her work would get a fair look, even if it meant risking his cover. As they walked back through the gardens, the Christmas lights casting a soft glow, Jessica felt a shift. Brandon's support, his easy laughter, his steady presence, it was more than she'd expected from a hired boyfriend. They paused by a fountain, its water reflecting the stars, and Brandon snapped another photo, this one unposed, capturing Jessica's thoughtful expression. Evelyn's gonna love this, he said, but his voice was softer, his eyes lingering on her. Jessica met his gaze, her sarcasm fading. You're not what I expected, Ford, she said, her tone half teasing, half serious. Brandon's smile was almost wistful. Neither are you, Hale. The night ended with them returning to Jessica's loft, the city's festive hum fading behind them. Brandon lingered at her door, reluctant to leave. Tomorrow's the big one, he said, referring to the visit to his grandmother's estate. Evelyn's not like your family. She's intense. Jessica laughed, but her eyes held his. I can handle intense. Can you? Brandon's chuckle was low, his hand brushing hers as he handed back her scarf. We'll see. As he drove away, the Tesla's headlights cutting through the night, Jessica stood at her window, her mind racing. The sabotage, the photos, the fire pit confession, it was all too much. Too real. Brandon, meanwhile, stared at his phone, Jessica's corrupted files open. He fired off a message to his team, demanding a review of her portfolio, his CEO authority masked as a favor. The ruse was holding, but the feelings stirring between them were anything but fake, and the next day at the Tate estate would push them both to the edge. The neon glow of the Thirsty Monk, one of Asheville's beloved craft beer haunts, spilled onto the cobblestone street, its warm light cutting through the chilly November night. Inside, the bar buzzed with locals sipping hoppy IPAs and swapping stories, the walls adorned with murals that echoed the city's artistic pulse. Brandon Tate leaned against the polished oak counter, his tailored jacket slightly rumpled after a long day of playing Brandon Ford, the unassuming project manager. Across from him, Jessica Hale nursed a cider, her auburn hair catching the dim light as she scrolled through her phone, her face etched with frustration. The previous night's walk through Asheville's Christmas lights had left them both unsettled, their staged romance blurring into something neither could fully define. But tonight, the stakes were higher, with threats looming from both professional rivals and personal doubts. Jessica's phone screen glowed with the remnants of her sabotaged portfolio, the corrupted files a gut punch to her dreams of breaking into Asheville's design scene. She'd spent the day trying to recover her work, only to confirm her suspicions. Talia Reed, a rival designer with a knack for corporate polish, had somehow accessed her app and wrecked her latest mural designs. "This was my shot at Jessica muttered, her hazel eyes flashing with anger. "Talia's been gunning for me since that gallery show last month. She called my work amateur in front of everyone." Brandon's jaw tightened, his CEO instincts flaring. He knew Talia's type: calculating, ambitious, and ruthless. Her portfolio had crossed his desk before, competent but uninspired, and now she was targeting Jessica, whose raw talent outshone her. "Send me whatever you've got left," Brandon said, his voice calm but firm. "I know a guy who can restore files, might give you a fighting chance." Jessica raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "You're full of surprises, Ford. First a magic discount at the inn, now a tech wizard. What's next? You own the bar." Brandon chuckled, deflecting with a sip of his stout. "Just trying to help, Jess. You deserve that pitch." His sincerity caught her off guard, and for a moment, she let herself believe he was just a kind stranger, not a hired boyfriend hiding his own secrets. She emailed him the salvageable files, unaware that Brandon was already planning to pull strings at Verdant Labs, ensuring her work would get a second look without revealing his true identity. Their conversation was cut short by a shadow looming. Over the bar, Jasper Holt, his lanky frame taut with barely concealed rage, stood with a pint in hand, his eyes locked on Brandon. Leela Vaughn, Jessica's sharp-tongued cousin, hovered behind him, her smirk as pointed as her bob. Well, Jasper said, his voice loud enough to turn heads. "Brandon Ford, the mystery man. Thought I'd find you here, cozying up with Jess?" Jessica stiffened, her hand tightening around her glass. "Jasper, go bother someone else," she said, her tone sharp, but Jasper ignored her, his gaze fixed on Brandon. "I got some news today," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "Verdant Labs fired me. No warning, no reason. But I bet you know something about it, don't you, Ford?" Brandon's pulse quickened, but his face remained a mask of calm. He'd orchestrated Jasper's dismissal after the brunch at the Greenwood Inn, using his CEO authority to act on the audit that exposed Jasper's misuse of company resources. It was a clean move, designed to neutralize a threat to his cover. But Jasper's fury was a complication he hadn't anticipated. "Sorry to hear that," Brandon said, his tone neutral, "but I'm just a project manager. I don't call those shots." Jasper leaned closer, his breath sour with beer. "Bull, I checked the employee records again. No, Brandon Ford, you're not who you say you are, and I'm gonna prove it." The bar's chatter dimmed, eyes turning to the brewing confrontation. Jessica stood, her voice cutting through the tension. "Back off, Jasper. You're embarrassing yourself." Her defense was fierce, her loyalty to Brandon surprising even her. Leela stepped in, her smile venomous. "Oh, Jess, don't be so touchy. We're just curious about your perfect boyfriend. He's got secrets, and you know it." Jessica's cheeks flushed, but before she could retort, Brandon placed a hand on her arm, his touch steadying. "Let's not ruin a good night," he said, his eyes locked on Jasper's. "You've got a bone to pick. Take it up with HR. Not here." The bar's patrons returned to their drinks, but Jasper's glare didn't waver. "This isn't over," he hissed, storming out with Leela in tow. Jessica exhaled, her shoulders slumping. "What was that about?" she asked, turning to Brandon. "He's obsessed with you." Brandon shrugged, his smile forced. Guy's got a chip on his shoulder. Probably mad he didn't get that promotion he wanted. It was a half-truth, but Jessica's frown deepened. She was starting to piece together the inconsistencies: Brandon's confidence, his mysterious connections, the way he handled every crisis with ease. "You're not telling me everything," she said, her voice low. Brandon met her gaze, his blue eyes unreadable. "Maybe," he admitted, "but I'm here for you, Jess. That's what matters." His words hung between them, heavy with unspoken truths. They left the bar, stepping into the cool night, the Christmas lights casting a soft glow over Asheville's streets. Jessica's mind churned, torn between gratitude for Brandon's support and suspicion about his secrets. As they walked, she shared more about Talia's sabotage, her voice raw. "She's been one step ahead of me forever," she said, kicking a pebble. "Now she's ruined my best work. I'm done." Brandon stopped, turning to face her. "You're not done," he said, his voice fierce. "Your designs are better than hers. I'll make sure someone at Verdant Labs sees them." Jessica laughed. "Bitter you how?" Brandon hesitated, then deflected. "I've got friends. Trust me." Behind the scenes, Brandon was already moving pieces. He'd texted his assistant, instructing her to fast-track a new pitch opportunity for Jessica, bypassing the usual channels. It was a risk any direct intervention could expose his CEO status, but he couldn't stand seeing her crushed. Back at her loft, Jessica opened her laptop, finding a partial recovery of her files thanks to a tech contact Brandon had recommended. She looked at him, sprawled on her couch, his ease belying the tension of the night. "You're too good to be true, Ford," she said, half teasing. Brandon grinned, but his heart raced. He was walking a tightrope, and every moment with Jessica made it harder to stay balanced. As they said goodnight, Brandon lingered at her door, the city's festive hum fading behind them. "Tomorrow's the Tate estate," he said, his voice low. "My grandma's not like your family. She sees everything." Jessica nodded, her eyes searching his. "I can handle her. Can you handle keeping up with me?" Her teasing held a challenge, and Brandon's smile was almost wistful. "I'm trying," he said, his hand brushing hers as he left. Alone, Jessica stared at her recovered designs, her mind on Brandon's words. He was helping her in ways she didn't understand, and the warmth in her chest was no longer just gratitude. For Brandon, driving back to his hotel, the memory of her fierce defense at the bar lingered, a reminder that this fake romance was becoming dangerously real. The Tate estate sprawled across a ridge in the Blue Ridge Mountains, its stone facade glowing under the late November sun, a testament to old money and modern ambition. Towering pines framed the driveway, where Brandon Tate's Tesla Model X rolled to a stop, its sleek black surface a stark contrast to the rustic charm of Asheville's outskirts. Inside, Jessica Hale adjusted her scarf, her hazel eyes wide as she took in the mansion's grandeur, flutuzzling windows, a wraparound porch, and a view that stretched across the misty peaks. Their fake relationship, now a fragile tightrope, after days of dodging scrutiny, faced its ultimate test. Evelyn Tate, Brandon's grandmother, whose sharp wit and sharper eyes could unravel their ruse in seconds. Jessica glanced at Brandon, his tailored coat doing little to hide the tension in his shoulders. "You weren't kidding about intense," she whispered, her voice laced with nervous humor. Brandon, still posing as Brandon Ford, a project manager at Verdun Labs, forced a smile. "Evelyn's like a human lie detector," he said, his blue eyes scanning the estate. "Stick to the story, and we'll be fine." But his confidence wavered. The confrontation with Jasper Holt at the Thirsty Monk last night had shaken him. Threat to expose his identity was a loose end, and the investor pitch looming over Verdant Labs added pressure. Jessica, meanwhile, was reeling from her own battles. The sabotage of her portfolio by Talia Reid had crushed her hopes. Though Brandon's mysterious tech contact had restored enough files for a last-minute pitch to Verdant Labs, she didn't know Brandon had orchestrated the opportunity, using his CEO authority to bypass standard protocols. They stepped into the estate's foyer, where polished hardwood floors and a chandelier made from recycled glass, another Verdana Labs touch set, an imposing tone. Evelyn Tate, a petite woman with silver hair and piercing gray eyes, greeted them with a smile that didn't quite reach her face. "Brandon, my dear," she said, her voice warm but probing. "You've finally brought someone worth meeting." She turned to Jessica, her gaze appraising. "And you must be Jessica. Tell me, how did my grandson win you over?" Jessica, prepared for the Inquisition, launched into their rehearsed story. A meet-cute at the River Arts District Festival, shared laughs over craft beer, a romance that bloomed under Asheville's autumn skies. Evelyn nodded, but her eyes lingered on Brandon, as if sensing the cracks in his project manager facade. The morning unfolded with a tour of the estate, Evelyn leading them through manicured gardens and a solar-powered greenhouse, her pride in Verdant Labs innovations evident. Jessica, playing the doting girlfriend, held Brandon's hand, their fingers interlocking with an ease that felt less staged each time. She snapped photos for Evelyn's approval, a candid of Brandon by a fountain, another of them laughing under an oak tree, each shot blurring the line between pretense and reality. Brandon, caught up in the moment, found himself watching Jessica, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, her wit disarming Evelyn's pointed questions. "You're quite the artist," Evelyn said, eyeing Jessica. "Brandon needs someone with vision." Jessica flushed, her smile genuine. "He's got plenty of that himself," she said, squeezing his hand, and Brandon's heart skipped, the lie feeling truer than ever. But the calm shattered when Evelyn invited them to a surprise event, an impromptu visit to Verdun Labs headquarters, where Jessica had been granted a last-minute interview for a design position. Brandon froze, his mind racing. He'd arranged the interview to give Jessica a fair shot, but he hadn't anticipated Evelyn's involvement or the risk of exposure. "A little test," Evelyn said, her smile sly. "I want to see how you two support each other." Jessica's eyes widened, panic flickering. "An interview today?" she asked, her voice tight. Brandon squeezed her hand, his voice low. "You've got this, Jess. Show them what you can do." But inside he was scrambling. Talia Reid, Jessica's rival, would likely be at the headquarters, and any slip could reveal his true identity. The Verdun Labs office was a sleek hub of innovation, its open-plan design filled with natural light and prototypes of solar panels. Jessica, clutching her restored portfolio, felt out of place among the polished professionals, her nerves fraying as she spotted Talia Reed across the room. Talia, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, smirked, her confidence unshaken. "Didn't expect to see you here, Jessica," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Thought you'd given up after that portfolio disaster?" Jessica's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, the interview panel called her name, and Evelyn ushered them into a conference room, insisting on observing. Brandon, introduced as her supportive boyfriend, took a seat in the back, his presence a quiet anchor. The interview began smoothly, Jessica presenting her mural designs with passion, her vision of Asheville's landscapes captivating the panel. But halfway through, Talia, invited as a guest consultant, interrupted, pointing out a flaw in Jessica's portfolio, a file that appeared altered, suggesting plagiarism. Jessica's face paled, recognizing Talia's sabotage. "That's not my work," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Someone tampered with my files." The panel murmured skeptical, and Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her gaze shifting to Brandon, who sat frozen, his CEO instincts screaming to intervene. Unable to stay silent, Brandon stood, his voice cutting through the tension. "Excuse me," he said, his tone commanding. "I'm Brandon Tate, CEO of Verdant Labs, and I personally reviewed Jessica's original files. This sabotage is unacceptable, and I'll ensure it's investigated." The room fell silent, Talia's smirk vanishing, Jessica's eyes widening in shock. Evelyn's lips twitched, a mix of surprise and approval, but Jessica's gaze burned with betrayal. "CEO," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The panel, flustered, apologized to Jessica, promising a fair review, but her focus was on Brandon, his revelation shattering their carefully crafted ruse. As the interview ended, Jessica stormed out, Brandon following her to the office's rooftop terrace, where Asheville's skyline stretched before them. "You lied to me," she said, her voice raw. "This whole time you weren't some project manager. You're the guy who rejected my portfolio." Brandon's shoulders sagged, guilt flooding him. "I didn't want to complicate things," he said, his voice low. "I saw your work, Jess. It's brilliant. I fixed the interview because you deserved a chance." Jessica's eyes glistened, torn between anger and gratitude. "You should have told me," she said, her voice breaking. "I trusted you." Brandon stepped closer, his hand hovering near hers. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw. "But everything else, the way I feel about you, that's real." Jessica turned away, her mind reeling. The family, the photos, the fire pit confession, all of it was tainted by his deception. Yet his sincerity, his fierce defense, lingered in her chest. Evelyn approached, her expression unreadable. "You've got guts, Brandon," she said. "And you, Jessica, have talent. Don't let this fool's secrecy stop you." She left them on the terrace, the tension thick. Jessica looked at Brandon, her anger softening. "You're still a jerk," she said, a reluctant smile breaking through. "But you're my jerk, for now." Brandon's grin was tentative, hope flickering. As they left the office, the lights twinkling below, the fake romance teetered on the edge of something undeniable. But the final day at the estate would decide its fate. The final day of Thanksgiving weekend dawned over Asheville, the Blue Ridge Mountains bathed in a soft, golden light that promised a crisp, clear morning. The city's downtown sparkled with Christmas decorations, their twinkling lights reflecting off the cobblestones as holiday shoppers bustled through the streets, their laughter mingling with the faint strum of a busker's guitar. Jessica Hale stood on the balcony of her loft, her auburn hair loose in the breeze, her hazel eyes tracing the skyline she'd come to love. The events of the past few days, Brandon Tate's revelation as CEO of Verdant Labs, the sabotaged interview, the unraveling of their fake relationship had left her reeling. Her heart caught between anger, gratitude, and something deeper. She wasn't ready to name Brandon, now exposed as the man behind the company that had rejected her work, had asked for a chance to explain, and today, as their ruse reached its end, she'd agreed to meet him one last time. Brandon stood at the edge of Pack Square Park, his tailored coat replaced with a simple sweater, his usual polish softened by the weight of the truth. The park, adorned with a towering Christmas tree and wreaths, buzzed with families taking photos, their joy a stark contrast to the knot in his chest. His grandmother, Evelyn Tate, had approved of Jessica after the Verdant Labs interview, her sly smile hinting she'd suspected his deception all along. But Jessica's reaction, her hurt, her fire had shaken him more than any boardroom crisis. He'd orchestrated her interview, ensured her talent was recognized, but his lies had nearly cost him her trust. As he spotted her approaching, her forest green coat a familiar beacon, he braced himself, knowing this moment would decide whether their fake romance could become something real. Jessica stopped a few feet away, her arms crossed, her expression guarded. "You've got 5 minutes, Tate," she said, her voice sharp but softer than the night before. "CEO or not, you owe me an explanation." Brandon nodded, his blue eyes steady. "I messed up, Jess," he said, his voice raw. "I hid who I was because I didn't want you to see me as some corporate suit. I wanted you to see me. He gestured to the park, the festive chaos around them. This is it started as a deal, but it's more now. You're more. Jessica's breath caught, her defenses wavering. She'd spent the night replaying their moments, the fire pit confession, his defense at the interview, the way his hand felt in hers. But trust was harder to rebuild than feelings. They walked through the park, the holiday lights casting a warm glow. Brandon explained his side. The pressure from Evelyn to settle down, the investor pitch that could make or break Vertin Labs, the fear of losing everything if he didn't play his part. I saw your portfolio months ago, he admitted, his voice low. I should have fought for it then, but I didn't. When I met you, I knew I had to fix that. Jessica stopped, her eyes searching his. So you set up the interview? Risked your whole Brandon Ford act just for me. Brandon nodded, a faint smile breaking through. You're worth it, Jess. Your work, your fire year, the real deal. Jessica's anger softened, but she wasn't ready to let him off the hook. You could have told me, she said, her voice quieter. I trusted you, and you played me. Brandon stepped closer, his hand hovering near hers. I know, he said, and I'll spend as long as it takes to earn that trust back. His sincerity hit her hard, and for the first time, she let herself consider what she felt, the warmth in her chest, the way his presence steadied her, even now. She took his hand, a tentative gesture, and they continued walking, the park's festive hum fading into the background. Their destination was a quiet cafe near the square, a cozy spot with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. Over steaming mugs of hot chocolate, they talked not as Brandon Ford and his hired girlfriend, but as two people navigating something real. Jessica shared her fears of failing in Asheville's art scene, her dreams of painting murals that captured the city's soul. Brandon listened, his usual CEO confidence replaced by genuine curiosity. You're going to make it, he said, his voice firm. Vertin Labs wants you. I want you. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility, and Jessica's smile was small but real. We'll see, Tate, she said, her teasing tone laced with hope. The conversation was interrupted by a call from Diane Hale, Jessica's mother, inviting them to a final family gathering at the house. Jessica hesitated. She'd faced enough scrutiny from her parents and cousin Leela, but Brandon squeezed her hand. One last performance, he asked, his grin boyish. Jessica laughed, nodding. You're buying dessert then? They drove to the Hale home, the Teslas hum a familiar comfort, and were greeted by Diane's warm embrace and Tom's grudging nod. Lila and Jasper were absent, their absence a relief after the bar confrontation. But Diane's questions about the Verdant Labs interview filled the air. Jess, you nailed it, didn't you? She asked, her eyes bright. Jessica glanced at Brandon, her smile wry. Had some help, she said, her tone hinting at their shared secret. As the family settled around the living room, Tom pulled Brandon aside. His gruff demeanor softened. Heard you're the big boss at Verdant Labs, he said, his eyes searching. Jess deserves someone who's honest. You that guy? Brandon met his gaze, his voice steady. I'm trying to be, sir. She's worth it. Tom nodded, a rare smile breaking through. Good, don't screw it up. The exchange, brief but heavy, left Brandon determined to prove himself not just to Tom, but to Jessica. Later, as the family shared leftover pie, Evelyn arrived, her silver hair gleaming under the porch lights. She'd seen the photos from their staged moments, Brandon and Jessica laughing by the fountain, cozy by the fire pit, and her approval was clear. You've chosen well, Brandon, she said, her voice low. And Jessica, your designs are extraordinary. Verdant, lucky to have you. Jessica blushed, her acceptance into the company now official, thanks to Brandon's intervention. But Evelyn's next words, directed at Brandon, carried a warning. No more games, grandson. Be the man she deserves. Brandon nodded, his throat tight, knowing the stakes were no longer just about funding or facades. That's the evening wound down. Brandon and Jessica stepped onto the porch, the Asheville night alive with stars and the distant glow of holiday lights. So, Jessica said, her voice soft. What happens now? The deal's over. Brandon turned to her, his hand finding hers. No cameras or scripts to guide them. It doesn't have to be, he said, his voice raw. I want to do this for real. Jess. Dinner. No lies. Just us. Jessica's heart raced, her smile breaking through. You're still on probation, Tate, she teased, but her hand squeezed his, a promise in the gesture. They stood there, the city's festive hum wrapping around them, the fake romance giving way to a new beginning. The next day, Jessica started at Verdant Labs, her desk overlooking Asheville's skyline, her murals set to grace the company's new headquarters. Brandon, no longer hiding, watched her from his office, a photo of their fire pit moment on his desk. Evelyn, true to her word, secured her investment, but her real gift was her approval of Jessica. As Asheville sparkled under its holiday glow, Brandon and Jessica took their first real step together. Their story no longer a pretense but a spark of something true, ready to light up the city they both called home.